Okay, today we are going to make this flower block that I designed, and we're going to break it down into 4 quarters, 4 smaller blocks that come together to make the flower block. So this is 1 quarter that I already made, and then I'm going to demonstrate this in the video, and then you'll make 1 more of each of those to put them all together. So if you look at the 1 quarter, it's also composed of 4 little blocks, 4 smaller squares that have quarter circle cuts on them. So if I made one already, you can see that would go right over that. So that's the 1 block, that's 1 quarter of this block. The block will finish at 18 inches. So the math is a little tricky, so I've written a tutorial and I'm also going to demonstrate the cutting so that we don't get confused. Here's the block that we're going to make. The center flower alternates with the peach and the ochre florals, the floral ochre and the peach. So I did one out of the peach, and I'm going to use ochre for the block on the video. So I'll put that aside. What I did is I've cut the small blocks already. All of the small blocks for this quarter need to be cut at 5.5 inches square. So I use this ruler, the OmniGrid, and actually let me use a beige one so you can see the markings a little bit better. This is, we'll put the 0 side in. I'll slide this up to 5.5 on this side and 5.5 on this side. And I just cut my fabric. To make this block, we also need 4 of the beige color, which is eggshell in our pattern. It's called eggshell. I had to substitute because I was out of that color, so I used another light beige. But so there's 4 of these. 1 called pond. There's 2 called wheat, and the 1 center one for that is ochre or peach. I alternated. You can also do them all in 1 color. So once you've cut your blocks, you're ready to now cut your quarter circles. Okay, for that we're going to use our OmniArc circle ruler that I think everybody has. And I'll just start with this one, the pond and the eggshell and the one in the corner. So right now I'm going to get my pond, and we know that that's the bigger circle. So I'm going to just use, I'm going to line it up on the black lines of the OmniGrid ruler. I'm going to line the black lines on the edges of my OmniGrid ruler, and I'm going to cut at right where it says 5 inch on that curve. I'm just going to mark it with the pen so you can see it right now, but that's where I'm going to cut. You see that? And I'll get my, again, I put the corner right here. I line up the black lines along the edges of the fabric block, and I'm just going to cut on the 5 inch line. There we go. Okay, so this is the one that we need. Obviously, it's going to go right there. And this is scrap. We can't use it for this block. So the second part of this block is going to be my outside square, the L shape that goes with this block. Okay, I actually need 2 L shapes. So I'm going to cut them both at the same time because one will go with this block and one goes with that block. So I'm going to take 2 pieces of fabric and layer them. And we want this to fit the 5 inch circle, but we have to add a 1/4 inch to each piece for seam allowance. Because we already cut this right at 5, instead we can't add a 1/4 inch to that anymore, so we'll add a 1/2 inch to this one, and that just makes it doing the math easier. So what I'm going to do is let me line this up on a grid so you can see the other lines. I'm just going to line this block up on these darker yellow lines so you can see, because we're still going to use the 5 inch cutting line on the OmniArc ruler, but the for the bigger piece, for the quarter circle piece, we just line the edges of the fabric up on the black lines, okay? For the L-shaped, we have to add a 1/2 inch. So we add it along these two straight edges. I'm going to move my ruler over 1/2 inch this way, and you can see I just moved it over. So now there's a 1/2 inch between the edge of the fabric and the black line. And I'm going to move it 1/2 inch this way. I'm just going to line it up on the mat underneath, make sure it's straight. So now, here's the black line on one side, the black line on the other, and I have an extra 1/2 inch here and here. And now I'm still going to cut on the 5-inch line. That's how I've added my seam allowance, and I cut 2 of these at one time. This now is scrap, the inside, and this now will fit with the quarter circle block that I did. So there we go. That'll be one, and this will go on the other side with this piece. So I'm just going to finish cutting. Sometimes what I'll do is put a pin. Oh, before I pin it, I'm going to cut them all and take them over to the machine. But when I sew them, I'm going to take these. This is one block. I'm going to take this one and fold it in half, just like this. And that middle seam right there, I'm just going to take the tiniest little nip out of it. Okay, that's going to mark my center, and I'm going to fold my quarter circle in half to look like a slice of pizza. I'll just finger press that, and I'll take a little nip out of that. We've done this before, but I was just reminding you. So when we sew them together, we know that that's where we want to line these edges up to sew them. And so I remember which pieces are going together. I'm going to stick a little pin in that and put it to the side. And I'm going to cut this one. Again, this is the bigger piece, so we just line it up. The black lines on the edge of the fabric, and cut on the 5-inch line. Let's see if I cut through. There we go. This becomes scrap. We cut 2 of these at once, so I already have this. I'm going to, again, fold it in half, finger press, and just take the tiniest little nip to mark my center. I'm going to do the same with this piece, and take the tiniest little nip. And put a pin in it before taking it over to the machine. I have 2 more to do. I have these 2 squares. I don't know if you can see it. These are exactly the same. So these will be cut together, and these will be cut together. So I'm going to stack those and cut. So for these 2 opposite squares, I need the bigger piece again. So I'm just going to line them up. Make sure they're straight. I'm going to put the black line on the edge of the fabric. And I will cut on the 5-inch line. There we go. So this is now scrap. Oops, didn't quite get that. We can push it to the side. I've got these 2 pieces. And now I'm going to cut the L pieces of that. So to do the L pieces, I'm going to line this up on my mat where I can see where the 1/2 inch, where a 1/2 inch away would be. I'm going to take my Omni arc. I'm going to put it like I normally would with the black lines on the edge of the fabric. I'm going to move it a 1/2 inch this way. So I'm just going to put it 1/2 inch on the line on the mat here. And I'm going to move it a 1/2 inch that way towards me. And then I'm going to continue to cut on the 5-inch circle, just like the other 2. And so now, whoops, I didn't quite get through all that. I think I dulled my blade when I hit the ruler. Let me just snip where it's stuck. Okay, so now this is scrap, and this is what I want. I'm just going to mark the centers and go over to the machine and sew. Circle pieces before, and we're just going to, this is the way we want it to look when it's done. As this is supposed to come out a little further because we've added some seam allowance. And here's our two centers that are marked by notches. We're going to flip it right sides together, and now we're going to sew this. We're going to just shift this like that and begin sewing. You can put a pin or two in it if you want. I'm going to move it to 1/4 inch, and I just keep moving this fabric back to align with the edge and sew it at 1/4 inch. And you can see the notches are lining up beautifully. Let's go right past our middle. A little too far there. And if you have a little extra, just kind of brush it back to the back and side, and we'll just keep realigning this to the edge. And there we go. We'll do all 4 of them that way. One more step that we need to do before we can sew these 4 squares together. So I'm going to go ahead and arrange them as like it would go next to that one. So these two go opposite, and this will be this way in the corner. We're actually going to turn the block, so these are side by side in a minute, but and the green goes to the outside like that. So before we can sew these together, each of these blocks have to be trimmed to an even 5 inches, and they'll lose a 1/2 inch. And the seam allowance is 1/4 inch on each side. We'll make it a 1/2 inch smaller. So our finished size of these little squares will be 4.5 when they're sewn together, and it will give us a 9-inch block, and then 9 and 9 is 18, and the overall they'll be 18 inches. So that's the math on this. So I'll just show you how I trim these. This is kind of wonky here, so I just trimmed. You can line it up and trim a little bit straight off there, and I can line this up. I can see it's, I'm going to line it up on the grid here and just line up my ruler, and I'll make the corner nice and straight, and then I'll take this and measure 5 inches. Let's get the wrong corner. Put the 1 by 1 away from me, and I'll just move this up to 5-inch line here and the 5-inch line here, and I will go ahead and trim. Oops, this is bent back. So there we go. I'm right at 5 on the corner here, 5 on both sides, and I'll trim this way and this way. Oops, didn't quite cut through. So once they're all cut to 5 inches, then I would just sew the 4 together, and this one will actually go like this, and the green pond will go opposite. This will go here, and this will go here, and that'll be the top half of that flower square, and we'll do 2 more of these for the bottom half, and they'll be opposite, these 2 colors in the middle. But these get trimmed to an even 5 inches square and then sewn together. Once they're sewn together, as you can see here, they'll finish at 4.5 inches square, and I still have 1/4 inch to sew it to the next block. But once this is completely stitched in, it'll be 4.5, and together they'll make a 9-inch block, and our 4 9-inch finished blocks will be 18 inches. And so that's how you assemble this block.